Bom dia, bom dia.
Bom dia a todas, todos. Deixa eu só tirar o som aqui. Aí. Bom, vamos. A gente pede, antes de mais nada, desculpa aí pelo atraso de 10 minutos. A gente teve uma questãozinha técnica aqui. Descobrimos algumas novas funções do navegador também. Bom, a gente vai começar hoje mais um Arquiteturas do Sul Global, mais uma conversa. Eu sou o Marco Artigas, Pedro Vada, os organizadores, e o Pedro em breve vai apresentar a nossa convidada de hoje. Queria começar agradecendo a Escola da Cidade por realizar junto com a gente esses encontros e principalmente por optar pela transmissão ao vivo e, enfim, aberta ao público, gratuito. A gente acredita que pelo tema que aborda esse curso aborda, essa é a melhor forma da gente espalhar, né, esse conteúdo. O curso faz parte de uma série de outros cursos livres da Escola da Cidade, que, enfim, oferecem conteúdos de temáticas diversas, e todos estão sendo realizados de forma remota por conta da pandemia, né? A gente gostaria de agradecer também a equipe do Baú, que é a equipe de comunicação da Escola da Cidade, de comunicação de audiovisual, e a equipe de design que está fazendo esses nossos posters, essas nossas capas de Instagram, Facebook e tal, super bonitas. A gente gostaria de agradecer a presença de vocês também, que acordam a maioria dos sábados de manhã para acompanhar as nossas conversas. E, bom, uma breve apresentação do curso. A gente sabe que temos um público fiel que nos acompanha aí todos os sábados, mas sempre tem um pessoal novo que entra. E, enfim, faz tempo já que o VAD e eu, a gente se debruça na questão dos processos de projeto e pesquisa dentro da arquitetura e do urbanismo, e muito mais em ter o interesse em olhar o resultado final, a gente quer entender esse miolo, né, esse meio do caminho, enfim, todas as questões que passam por isso até chegar no resultado final. Então, a gente tem essa questão também de olhar um recorte contemporâneo, né, o que está sendo produzido hoje, e juntando todas essas questões, a gente olhou para o Sul Global, que, enfim, é a nossa região do planeta, onde a gente acredita que hoje em dia é interessante virar os olhos e entender e tentar se aproximar, porque os problemas são muito parecidos, as questões são muito próximas, e é uma possibilidade de uma troca muito grande entre todos nós. Enfim, para todas essas conversas, a gente selecionou para o semestre inteiro 8 encontros, né, com convidadas e convidados de países diversos desse Sul Global. A gente já conversou com o Remígio Chilauli, do Moçambique, o pessoal do Norte, Oficina de Criação, de Recife, com o coletivo Pratt Architecture, da Nigéria e África do Sul. A última aula foi com o pessoal do Sindicato de Arquitetura do Equador, e hoje a gente vai falar com a nossa convidada de Uganda, que o Vada vai apresentar em breve. A gente ainda vai ter mais outras 3 conversas com o pessoal, outras 2 conversas, desculpa, pessoal não, 3, né, Vada? México, Angola e China. Bom, são conversas incríveis que a gente está tendo, a gente aprofunda um pouco sobre a produção contemporânea das convidadas e convidados. E antes do Vada fazer a apresentação, o nosso esquema da conversa ele é bem simples, a gente vai conversar em torno de 1 hora e meia, a gente sempre fala isso, acaba fazendo 2 horas, mas enfim, a nossa meta normalmente é 1 hora e meia. E a gente deixa a caixa de comentários aberta para vocês, então vocês podem mandar perguntas, podem mandar comentários, a gente vai ler, passar para a nossa convidada hoje, e a partir daí a gente entra numa conversa, num debate sobre a apresentação. Queria aproveitar para dizer para vocês seguirem o canal do YouTube da Escola da Cidade, compartilhar com amigas, amigos, e porque assim vocês ficam sabendo de tudo o que está acontecendo por lá, além do nosso curso livre, né? Vada, se você quiser pegar o gancho.
Tá, legal. Só comentando, hoje a conversa vai ser em inglês. A gente pretende, num futuro muito próximo, colocar as legendas e as traduções das que forem em inglês. Então, já teve a matriarca em inglês, agora com a Adengo Architecture. Bom, a gente tem já há um tempo, a gente acompanha o trabalho da Doreen e pareceu muito oportuno trazê-la nesse curso, justamente porque ela tem uma discussão sobre defender defender a prática, a arquitetura, a prática de arquitetura nas cidades africanas, de contextos que são completamente complexos, como os nossos, em algumas partes do Brasil. E aí ela defende que que a arquitetura tem esse valor como prática transformadora, né? Então, acredita ser fundamental mostrar para os arquitetos, mostrar que os arquitetos urbanistas podem melhorar a vida cotidiana das pessoas, ajudando as cidades a se desenvolverem de forma mais sustentável. Doreen tem formação, arquiteta, tem formação na Universidade Católica e em Yale, passou em diversos escritórios em Londres, Washington, Nova York, foi professora no Pratt Institute, em Nova York, na Pratt University, em Uganda, e até recentemente dava aula na Universidade de Joanesburgo, na África do Sul. A gente tem, acompanhando a Doreen Adengo também, a Nina Peters or Peters?
It's Peters.
Peters. A Nina acompanhando junto a Doreen. E qualquer pergunta que vocês tiverem, tem o chat, a gente vai lendo e vai conversando com ela. Vocês podem fazer a pergunta ou em inglês ou em português, tá bom? So, thank you very much for your attention and for your patience to be here with us today. And Nina, welcome. Doreen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Doreen.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Go ahead.
No, you can talk.
Okay.
I'm gonna introduce myself and introduce Nina, and then start the presentation.
Sure.
It's okay? Okay. So I'm Doreen Adengo. I'm speaking from Kampala, Uganda. And I set up a practice here where our goal is to advocate for architecture, because we found ourselves in a context where a lot of people build for themselves. So we have to, there's no appreciation for the role of the architect. So we have to always make a case that architects are important in the way that the city can grow sustainably. I'll talk a bit more about how the practice was set up, but I'll introduce Nina. She's been working with me for about 3 years, and there's been collaborative projects that we've done. She's also been in a couple of the workshops, which I'll show you. And there's other staff. Altogether, there's 4 of us. And I feel very strongly, I know that the title of this, your course is Global South, Practice in the Global South. I believe very strongly in the North to South exchange of knowledge. I think there's a benefit in that, and I'll explain what that is. Within the practice, there's a constant training that happens of the staff and even myself, that I found that there is strength in South to South and also North to North exchange of knowledge. So Nina, you can say something about yourself, and then I'll start the presentation.
My name is Nina. Doreen, I think we work since like now 5 years together.
Oh, okay. Time flies, yes.
Yeah. So my name is Nina. I'm here based in Berlin. I'm also right now sitting in my in my place. Yeah, and since 5 years, I work on and off for Doreen, and going to Kampala now. Like I manage to do that every year, sometimes for, I don't know, 4 months, sometimes just for a month. Yeah, now it's not possible, but we will see when it's possible again. But yeah, I came to Uganda because I was working at a university doing a research internship there, and then I was curious to know, like, how is it to work, and that's how I then met Doreen. And since then, yeah, I come for some projects and we do it together, and I really much appreciate it, because you can learn a lot and you can get other perspectives on things, and understand things, and yeah, being curious is, I think, really nice to do that, and you meet like super nice people always, so I really love that. And here in Berlin, I'm working in common good oriented city development. So.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Nice. Welcome.
Okay. So now I'm going to go to this presentation. So let me go to full screen. So you can see this clearly?
Yes.
Okay. So the title again is Advocating for Architecture, because I've found myself in a position to make a case that architects are critical in the way the city is growing. And I'll explain this in more detail. This is Kampala. It's a city originally built on 7 hills. Now there's many hills. And we're right next to Lake Victoria. And in between the hills, there are wetlands that filter water before it gets to Lake Victoria. So what you see here are these wetlands that are in between the hills. We have a population of about 3 million people. I looked up Sao Paulo, and you are 22 million people. So you're 7 times larger than us. But all the same, we're the largest city in Kampala and growing really fast, at a very fast rate. This is a study that was done by the Commonwealth Association of Architects. And what they found is the red line, it shows the rate of urbanization, which is really, really high. And the number of architects is really low. So you can't even see any blue for Uganda because we're so few. And if we go to the next slide, oh, sorry, actually, I'll stay on this slide. When they did this study, there was 178 architects. Right now, we're probably around 200 architects, but it still is a very small number of architects for 43 million people in the whole country. And I gave a presentation in Angola, actually, where students asked, oh, does it mean that the architects get all the projects because we're so few? But no, what it means is people are building without us. And sometimes the outcome is not so good, not good quality. There's collapsing of buildings. It leads to many, many issues. So that's one of the contexts. The other one is we have very few education institutes, very few schools of architecture. In Uganda, there's 4 main schools. I looked up Brazil and I counted 44 from what I saw. So there's many institutions. And also in each of these institutions, about 10 students graduate per year. So very few students that are coming out. And so this, in a summary, explains the context that I'm in, and it informs the way that I built the practice. So as both Nina and I mentioned a bit earlier, this is a practice of people with a diverse background. They're interns out of people working here that are out of schools here in Uganda, in Tanzania. So the first person, Franklin, studied in Tanzania. He's Ugandan. Then Nina studied in Germany, Derek in Uganda, and Jani in Norway. And Nina and Jani work on and off with projects and in a very collaborative way. And I find that the different backgrounds and different level of skills enriches each person's experience also as the person leading the practice, trying to get the clients, figuring out, accounting, all those things. Sometimes it's very hard for me to do the training myself. So the peer-to-peer training, I think, is really key, and it's a big part of the way that I'm running the practice. And each of these individuals have actually been in 1 or 2 workshops, and I'll explain how that has happened. So the first project I'm going to show is African Mobilities. This is an initiative started by Professor Mpo Matsipa, who's been spearheading this idea around mobility and migration within Africa. And then she invited in collaborators from different parts of the continent. We were representing East Africa. We looked at Uganda, where there are many refugees. So Uganda is friendly to refugees. One of the largest groups are Congolese. And we embarked on a study, which I'll explain as we go through. But it first started with a workshop. So this is the first workshop I actually did in 2017, I believe. You'll see that Nina is here. There's someone else called Randy, who you'll see later on, that stayed on to work on the project as it evolved. So in this workshop that we call Kampala Exchange, we went into the markets. There's a misconception that refugees stay on refugee camps, but they actually soon leave a camp, move to a nearest town or city, and they start to engage in a trade that they've been doing from before. So they tend to be very active in markets, doing a trade that they're familiar with. So this is what led us to the markets initially. And this was a very short workshop, 3 days, where the task was to identify a negotiation going on in the market and then represent it. And this idea of representing something that's constantly changing, constantly moving was a task that we were grappling with at the time. And I'm going to show you the video that describes it clearly.
There is a culture of people imagining the future of African cities in ways that don't include African architects and thinkers and creative people. And one of the things that I thought needs to happen very differently with this exhibition is, rather than sending all of our resources to Europe, to make sure that the resources are circulating on the African continent and that the exhibition becomes a resource for African students. African Mobilities is an African architecture exhibition that follows on from Architecture exhibition that was hosted by the Architecture Museum a few years ago.
I saw Kampala Exchange as a really good opportunity to have a platform where we can have different voices together, and also an audience that is made of a multidisciplinary group of students. So we went through kind of scheduling the 3 days and trying to see what kind of product could come out of it. We're both very interested in how a city could be represented and how to get students engaged with this question.
The Kampala Exchange, for me, it's a convergence of ideas. Different people from all over the world are meeting in one place and they're sharing ideas, and they get to grow together. We all learn something new, not only me learning, but I also give something to the tutors, and we get to learn from each other.
The Mercato research is obviously extending into other East African cities. Currently, we're working on the Kariakoo market in Dar es Salaam. So I was really interested in what aspects of that research could potentially translate into Kampala. And I think in the conversations that we were having, there were definitely things that would translate, but there were also things that were very specific and unique to the marketplaces here that we wouldn't be able to find in Dar es Salaam or in Addis Ababa.
The thinking for the workshop was really to bring African students in conversation with African designers as part of an intergenerational dialogue about the possibilities of creative research on the continent.
for me, it's been one experience that has both helped me to test my theoretical knowledge about interactions with the market, but also at the same time get to understand how we can apply this in my practice.
It's been a wonderful experience interacting with the architects, interacting with the speakers and stuff like that. So it's very good for my practice. And as a student, I feel like I've learned a lot that would really help me in the course as I finish up school.
The market experience was very intense, but at the end of it all, I got to understand how the market works and how the people interact with the spaces in the market, how the spaces also interact with the people, and how everything actually comes together in the whole market.
Kampala is a very compelling place to launch the exhibition and to have a series of exchanges because it has the largest refugee population in the entire African continent. So thinking about what that means in terms of the form of the city is really interesting. And thinking also about the city as a site of refuge. Over the past few days, we've had conversations about the kind of city that it is, that Kampala is, and the marketplace as a point of arrival for migrants. So the movement of Africans isn't simply an image of crisis, but also a site of innovation and creativity as well. And I think that there need to be architectural responses to these kinds of dynamic movements across the continent.
Having a platform that allows to strengthen networks, I think, is really valuable. And so something like this kind of connects us in a way.
What things are, easier to present in different contexts. And I think that's what was interesting about the students' questions, because there were things that they challenged me on that I haven't been challenged about before. And that I think helps us develop more robust approaches towards the spaces.
So this was the very first workshop that we were involved in, and really the first platform that I interacted with that allowed young, recent graduates and experienced, architects to have a discussion about the city. I found many times that students in Uganda want to look outside, like a context outside, and kind of ignore their own context. So I think imaging students in a market in their own city was really engaging for most of them. And so after the workshop, we set up a team, a multidisciplinary team. So under architecture was myself, Nina, who you've just heard from, Randy, who was also in the workshop. And then we had a social scientist who done research on markets, and then a video/photo person. And the last person we added to the team was the video guy over here, because we collected a lot of information over, it was a 6 months project. And about 3-4 months in, we had a lot of data and were struggling on how to represent what we'd found. How do we represent this information that we'd collected? And we found that video was a good media for it, and I'll explain how that happened. What I would say about the multidisciplinary collaboration is that I learned a lot. I learned about communication. I also learned that, as architects, we're used to speaking to each other, but once you have to speak to a social scientist, once you have to speak to a video guy, say with a journalist background, the video guy kind of pushed us to communicate clearly. I think architects, sometimes we're just not clear. We use words that the average person doesn't understand. And so if we are trying to get a message across, we have to think about how we present, how we tell a story. So storytelling became very center to this project, and I'll explain this as well. So we narrowed in on Congolese as a refugee group in Kampala, and then we found what we called an actor. The actor was Elvis, and we followed Elvis around for 3 months. He was in a trade of kitenge. Kitenge, these colorful fabrics that he's holding, and he has a shop in downtown Kampala. And we studied him and then came out with a lot of information, and then had to try and put it together. One of the things was his space was very transient. It wasn't static, it moved. And I'll explain in a few seconds what that means. And so a plan and section wouldn't explain his space. It needed a different kind of drawing. And so we started to look at perhaps collages, axons, and I'll show the video first and explain the kind of drawings that we came up with. for this project. So,
called Elvis Asalembe. I'm a Congolese by nationality, and I sell kitenge. Kitenge is a fabric made out of cotton with an African print on it or any African idea.
Kitenge is truly a global artifact, once produced in Indonesia, Holland, West Africa, and now increasingly China. But it isn't just a fabric. To many Africans, it's a symbol of independence and of influence.
In 2011, that's when I moved from Goma, where I was born, to Kampala. I moved because of civil war going on in my country. Yeah, it forced me and my family together to move up to Kampala.
After arriving in Uganda as a refugee, the kitenge trade provided Elvis with an opportunity.
We Congolese, we are good at selling kitenge. We are born in kitenge society.
In order to maximize profits, many building owners in downtown Kampala tried to squeeze as many shops as possible into their buildings. As a result, most shops fit into a 3 by 3 meter space. Elvis's shop, however, was originally designed as a storage closet. It's even smaller, measuring 3 by 1 meters. By having fold-out counters, Elvis has expanded his space to the standard 3 by 3 meters.
When I wanted to make different shelves in my shop there, I considered the size of the fabric because I wanted to have many shelves so that I may display all the fabrics properly on the shelves. So I told the carpenter to measure the fabric and to make for me shelves according to the size of the fabric. That's how my shelves are a little bit squeezed.
The shelves are multifunctional. They serve not only as a display area, but also as a storage space and as a colorful attraction for his shop. The fabrics are arranged according to quality. There's a lot happening within the shop, with designated areas for the customer, salesperson, and pedestrians. To many, this tight space might seem like it's not enough. However, by meticulously maximizing every inch of the space, Elvis makes it work. Kitenge fabrics have made their way to the global fashion industry.
Back in the day, kitenge was something maybe your mom would wear or your grandma would wear. It was never anything that anyone young would even consider wearing. Things that were considered traditional are trending now, but I feel even before that, it was an international trend on internationally recognized catwalks. There's this movement about being proud of our heritage.
The kitenge trade has enabled the Congolese community in Kampala to challenge the dominant representations of refugees as victims by exerting an influence over the urban fashion and culture.
The more I sell materials, the more I also get ideas of different prints also. In the future, I think I'll be also going to the factory and place my own order so that I may also get the quantity. In 5 years, I think I'll be having a very big shop.
Elvis's work in the kitenge trade provides an example of ways in which the refugee enterprise is actively transforming the social, cultural, and built environment in cities such as Kampala, and at the same time, forging connections to the global economy. All this in 3 by 3 meters.
So that's the video. One I would say is when we first met Elvis, we thought that we were going to look at his space and then design his space. And then we found that he'd already designed it. So we decided to document what we found. And what this collage shows is just how busy the area around his shop was. It's next to the taxi park. That's what this is showing. A lot of movement, a lot of trade. It's a very dense area. And these building owners, what we found, they submit one plan to the building authorities, and then they build a different plan that they know guys like Elvis want. And so Elvis's space is between 1 by 3 meter space, which he then expands on his own to a 3 by 3. And he built on the module of the fabric, meaning he went to a carpenter with the folded fabric. And the way the fabrics are folded is in a specific way, and even the quantities you buy are specific. The way they're packaged, the bags are a specific way. So everything around this fabric is very well calculated. And this drawing shows the shop when it's closed and then the shop when it's open. So this was our way of communicating how things can move from, how transient and how a space changes over time. So I'm going to now take a step back into the history of Kampala and give you very briefly what the history is. So Kampala was originally the capital, well, Kampala is the capital of Uganda right now, but originally it was the Kingdom of Uganda. And what you see here is one of the hills, Mengo Hill. On top of that hill was the King's Palace at the time. This was a sketch done by a British explorer in 1877, I believe. And this is a plan where you see the King's Palace and chiefs and wives around it. The way of building at the time was, the idea of building something permanent just didn't exist. So the materials were wood, thatch, reeds, mud, and the King's Palace itself was not meant to be permanent. Each king built a different palace on top of a different hill each time the king changed. So the idea of permanency just didn't exist. This is a sketch from 1827, you say they're wrong, by one of the British explorers. The first two explorers were Speke and Grant, and those are the two figures we see here in the center. That's the king of Uganda at the time, who's Mutesa I. This image shows what's believed to be the only record of him, like a photograph that was taken in 1875. And here's an artist's impression of that photograph. I can't go into details about what happened during the colonial period, but what I can say is the king after him, King Mwanga, it's under his rule when Buganda fell under the British colonial rule. And the British government used what they call an indirect rule. They kept the kings in place, the chiefs in place, because they felt the systems worked. And they kind of used the existing system to annex other kingdoms around Uganda to eventually make Uganda. So Uganda is made of about 42 different ethnic groups that were annexed during this time. But if you want to read about it more, there's a lot of literature that can tell you about this story. I'm going to now jump to the 1950s, which by now Uganda is a British protectorate. And there have been different plans for Kampala. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the one done by Ansmai, which is an extension to two particular hills. So the cover of his book, this shows the 7 hills, because as I said, originally it was 7 hills, and he's working on 2 of the hills, Kololo and Naguru. And he approached this using the Garden City plan, viewing each hill as almost like a satellite city with a buffer zone in between, which in our case is the wetlands. And his plans considered the topography and the climate as he was planning, forming ideas around the city plan. So here's the different hills, and in green are the wetlands in between. The top of the hills are kind of each of these different circles. But layered in this was also race, just because of the time that he was working in. And it's important to note that he felt that he was being inclusive to include all races in his plan, because typically at this time, there'll be a plan for just one race and that was it. So he felt that he was being inclusive by including each of these other groups. What is interesting about this plan is the area that is European, like Kololo and Nakasero, to this day still has the best infrastructure. And yeah, that's one thing I'd say about that. So now I'm going to skip to 1962. This is when we got independence. So Uganda's Independence Day is October 9th, 1962. The city at the time it was being planned for 50,000 people. It was very low density. This is the parliament. These are government buildings, about 4-story high. A lot of open area. This is National Theatre. And I think what's important to note is the city that was being planned for 50,000 people. At the time, the British didn't know independence was going to happen. And of course, no one could have thought of at the time that the city would grow to the 3 million people that we are. But we are 3 million people living on a city that was planned for 50,000 people. And that's because in between then there's a period of no growth due to just instability politically. And so the country almost restarted all over again in '85 when our current president came into power. And I'll talk about that. So around the period of independence, a lot of buildings were built for the new nation. And this is something that happened across Africa. I got involved in a workshop with architect Manuel Hartz. He has a project, African Modernism, which looks at all these modernist buildings that were built around that period of time of independence in Africa. And when the project came to Uganda, I was invited in to work with the exhibition. We decided to add the buildings that were in Uganda. Here we are as a team looking at one of the buildings at the university. There's one of the big challenges we had was getting information. A lot of archives were destroyed during the time of unrest in Uganda. So we found that most of the information was actually in British archives in the UK. And so we had a colleague send us, these are old postcards that show, for example, this is Uganda in 1895, Kampala. This a little later. This is one of the first permanent buildings. It was a fort built by Fort Lugard. This is the main street in the 50s. We then had this exhibition, and I made a lot of guided tours to talk about the buildings that we put together for the exhibition. And one of the big questions that came out of this was, what is African about this? If the title is African Modernism, and we're looking at buildings that all the materials were foreign, all the architects were foreign, what is African about this? And what I would say is that I understand that many people feel that it's wrong or even strange that the new nation could have buildings, their new buildings built by the colonizer, and they feel like it really just shouldn't have been this way. My response to that is that the architects at the time were responding to the climate and the topography. They did not respond to the culture. And this idea of the what is African architecture or what is African modernism, I feel that it's the students that are in school now that are best placed to answer this complex question. So I leave it to the students to think about what this could be, and I'm open to discussing it further during the Q&A. After that project, I started a project with the Canadian Centre for Architecture. It's called the Centering Africa Project, where my proposal looked at one of the dormitories at the university, Macquarie University. Is called Box. It's a brutalist building, also built during that era. It was built around the promotion or advocation for the education of women. So it's a girls' dormitory, and the reason that it's a high-rise is because there was a strong need to increase the number of girls at the university. And that's how this building came about. And I'm proposing not to look at the building as an icon, but to really understand how it's been used over time, what are the memories around these buildings, and what impact has it had on the women that had this housing while they were getting the education. And so that's where this project is. It's still in progress at the moment. Another project that's related to modernist architecture is funded by the Getty Foundation, based in LA, and the Uganda Museum won this grant where we're going to develop the first conservation management plan for a modernist building in Uganda. I think Uganda Museum are a good client because they already understand conservation, being a museum. And we have, again, a really diverse group of people working together. So Uganda Museum is leading this project. They're under the Ministry of Tourism. I'm on the project as the conservation architect based locally, but there are other international conservation architects involved. We have a photographer, graphic designer. So it's a mix of disciplines, again, very local, international, and then multidisciplinary. So many layers. And we started out with a workshop where we did what was called a rapid assessment of the building. And to me, what was most important discovery from this is initially I started thinking we're going to look at the building. And then I realized that the artifacts in the building, because these were collected over from like the 1900s, artifacts that I had never seen before, because the museum has a storage underneath. So when you go to Uganda Museum, what you see is 10% of what they have. They have a lot in storage and very valuable artifacts that are just as valuable as the building. And then there's the museum staff that are like the custodians of these artifacts, and their training, their knowledge is also equally important. So we're still in the middle of this project, but I'll very quickly show you the workshop that we did for it that explains how we're thinking of approaching this project.
I'm very excited to be here. There's been a workshop which has been taking place on the conservation of Keep It Modern project. This workshop has been very important for us on the way for preparing a guideline, especially for how can we ensure that this building will be sustainable and be useful in future.
It's 63 years since the museum was built, and so I think it's about time that we as professionals, we as museum people, architects, are thinking about what we can do to improve what is there, what was done, and make it better for posterity without necessarily changing the fabric of the building and the thought that went into it. So I'm very happy to be here with all the professionals who are here to talk about that same thing and put our minds together and see what we can come up with for the museum.
This project, after having the conservation management plan, will inform the administration of the museum on the best practice of not only conserving the building, but also the important collections that we hold.
This museum was built at a different time and in a different context. And of course, over time, a lot has changed. And so in thinking about the future of the museum, we need to think about how the city has grown, the users that want to interact with the museum, how they are thinking about things differently. And one thing that we would like to take into consideration is how to make the museum more accessible to the public.
I think it's important that we build appreciation for modern architecture, and we work towards preserving the original design intent of the architect. And in order to do that, we must understand the values, underlying values, and the issues, as well as the physical problems of the building. So we're working with the young students and young professionals to look at the values of the building, look at the problems, and try and resolve the issues, but still preserve the authenticity and integrity.
Conservation and heritage issues are a relatively new concept in education. So it is fantastic to draw in students and to go around at them and look at the building and check the building, draw them into the practice of this kind of work.
The tour around the workshop, very informing, and I found various things that had to be corrected, including the roof, and I felt that it was very important for me to discover this
I'm learning a lot on how to add on to something that's existing, how to deal with something that's already existing, and how to deal with the authenticity and the integrity of monumental buildings. And so far from the tour yesterday around the museum, I realized that so many changes have been made, so many things have been added onto the building, and I feel like there should be more order with how this is done.
The climate has really changed, especially, I think it's throughout the country. So this drastic change is having great impact on the buildings, on the artifacts we have in the museum. And I think with this workshop, we can come up with a conservation management plan and have informed decision-making that can help us preserve both the building and the artifacts in the museum.
My role in this project is to advise the project team members on the aspects of objects conservation and preservation, with a special focus on the indoor climate. So we will set up a set of sensors to measure the relative humidity and temperature in order to establish the risks for the collection in the coming time. And from those data, try to establish ways to reduce the risks and to reduce the impact on collections.
I like the approach that the Uganda Museum took to put the workshop together, because there is representation from across the sector. They did come and bring together a lot of stakeholders who will be important to coming up with this conservation plan.
Looking into the future, the museum needs to think of ways to become more interactive with the public, to come up with programs and initiatives that draw people in and allow them to be more part of how the museum is moving forward into the future.
I think that the museum, and it's also something that has been considered in the past, look at the museum as a culture center.
Unless you know your past, you will not know the future. If you lose this building, the past is lost. That's why we need a conservation management plan for this building. And this workshop has been about brainstorming, deliberating, and making guidelines for this building to ensure that it survives in the future.
I'll stop in here. So one of the unique challenges for the Uganda Museum is that it was built in the 50s, during a colonial era. It was built as a for-purpose museum. It was built in the middle of the city in a huge piece of land, and a lot has grown around it since. And so there's been a lot of pressure on the museum. At some point, about 10, 15 years ago, it was about to be demolished and replaced with, of all things, a shopping mall. And luckily, there was a pushback and protest, and the building was saved. But they still have a challenge of how to adapt to now. And this is something that we're going to try to work through and propose as we develop the conservation management plan. So this is something we're still in the middle of doing.
Just to notice, we just add Franklin Kazumba.
Okay.
Who worked with Doreen too. Welcome.
Hello. Okay. So we'll have him present himself at the end. Is it okay?
Okay.
Sure.
Yes, yeah. So I'll just go through, but he's coming just in time because this is a project that he worked on. So this project, the L building is, so there's some projects in the office that are what I call technical projects, whereas the ones with the workshop, they tend to be research. So for the technical projects, there's a client, in this case, someone who wanted a commercial building where the first two levels are commercial and then the top are apartments. And normally these clients want the building out of aluminium and glass. And so we were able to convince this client to use brick because his site is along Entebbe Road and close to a clay factory called Kajansi Clay Factory and Uganda Clay Factory in Kajansi. And so he agreed to switch the material to brick, which I feel was a big win for us. And so this is still under design. We're still working on this. But these are the renders that we showed. Other projects we've been involved in is affordable housing. So this is a plan of the first affordable housing project in 2015. It was in collaboration with a studio unit out of Makerere University. And we came up, the client was the developer. We came up with a house that's flexible. On one side, private space, and another side, public space, and just thinking of how it could be flexible in terms of the outdoor area. One thing I'll notice, we try to always work and propose a plan that responds to how people live. For example, a lot of people cook indoors, but a lot of Ugandans also cook outdoors. There's some cooking that happens a lot outdoors, so the kitchen always has to be next to a veranda or an outdoor area for cooking. For example, that's one thing that's going on here. We studied different materials, different types of bricks, and we were able to meet the budget for this developer. But what happened on this project is that the developer found that even though we met the cost of the house, once he looked at the cost of the roads, the water, all the infrastructure for a housing project, and on top of that, there was taxing, he gave up on the project because there was no profit at the end of the day. And this is the moment I realized that the issue of affordable housing, at least in Uganda, it's not about the house, it's about the policies around housing. And so I kind of changed my approach to housing after this project. This is a render of what one house could be. But more recently, we were approached by a different developer project client that wanted affordable housing. And the first thing that we pushed for was to have apartments instead of single houses. There's a cultural need here for people to have their house on their land. And the idea of buying an apartment up in the air somewhere is new, but I think it's something that will have to change because of the growth and the density. And so with this client, we worked with a finance person to come up with an algorithm and look at really like what would make sense for the amount of land they had. And luckily through this, it supported the idea for the apartments. And so again, we have local materials, brick. This time it's the, well, they're called hydroform bricks, so not burnt bricks, and just like very simple materials, recycled steel, some stone in some areas, and just thinking of how to build affordably, but also have a beautiful environment. And so this is the whole complex, the different buildings. We suggested shared stairs, so the stairs could be less. This is a retail block further up. This is one block showing the shared stairs. And here you get to see the brick screen around the stairs and the balconies and stuff. And so this is also something that's still in design. Then the next project is a workshop. This one is really small. This was last year, but something really fun, where in this workshop, we tasked the participants to pick an object that is familiar. So what we call an everyday, we call it the everyday workshop because they had to pick an everyday object. Some people picked baskets and some other objects, but the object that won was this stool. So this is a traditional stool, I believe within East Africa, not just Uganda. It's a very utilitarian stool. It's usually found in the kitchen. And so it has these legs of wood and then these coils that are a kind of reed. And so what we proposed was to deconstruct it and put it back together in an installation that elevated the thinking around this object. And in this one, the video is very short, but I'll show it. This is a time lapse around this video that will show, it went over 7 days where we deconstructed the stool, came up with different ways of putting it back together, and then picked one way to move forward as a team. It was also about team building, because as a team, we then had to build one installation and then agree on one idea around the installation through sketches, and then have this installation that lasted, I know, like just one season, probably like a month or 2 months before it was eventually moved. So here's the time lapse. So that was the final installation. It was a really fun project, and I think it really taught a lot about teamwork, how to work together. And also for the students involved, I think for myself as a student, when I did the design build kind of on hands-on projects, that's when I really understood what the drawings were communicating. So I feel like it's a different way to learn and a good way to learn. So that was that. So this is now the last project I'm presenting, the most recent one, the Global Urbanism Studio. So this studio brought us back to markets. If you remember the first project, Kampala Exchange, is the first time we were in the market. I've since been back to the market last year with the same group, and then we returned this year where the conditions have changed completely. And I'll explain this in detail. But from 2019, with Uganda Matters students and students from Washington University in St. Louis, we went into what is the most vibrant market in Kampala, Nakasero Market. This area that we're looking at was a parking lot that's been since taken over by vendors that have been displaced from other markets. This is a student calling this an organized chaos, and I explain why he's calling it an organized chaos. In this Google Maps, what you see is this is the market. So this building, these red buildings and all here. So it's a large market, but the area we're looking at is here that has the displaced vendors, and trying to understand those spaces. Right now it's completely changed. There's now entry points and points where you have to wash your hands, and and there's medical tents and temperature checks at each point, so it has changed. But last year, the students found that there were more activities in the market than they'd realized. A lot of social activities like Ludo, this Ludo in the market. There's also this movement that we saw with Elvis, where things were not static. The vendors kind of had a way of being present when they knew there was more people, and then being able to move away, whether it's because it's rained or because the pedestrians are less. This group called it a fluid edge. And with this student, this was a kind of collage diagram that shows how the activity changes over a period of time during one day when there's more people. I think what's most interesting here is that it's most busy very early in the morning, because that's when the fruits arrive from different parts of the country, and different vendors come to buy the fruits to take them to different points within the city. So I thought that was interesting. This other one also from last year was looking, what I really liked is this student developed a language on how to represent people and movement as well through sketch. I think young students these days jump to the computer too fast, but I think there's nothing wrong with a hand sketch. And I like this diagram that shows just the different activities. As you can see, between the actual building and the car, there's a lot of space for different vendors in between that. And that's what happens in the market. So I'm going to end now with the video from this year, which I believe is on. The Global Urbanism Studio this year has gone back to Nakasero Market, the most vibrant market in Kampala. We have found it in a completely different condition.
WHO has been assessing this outbreak around the clock. We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
Nakasero Market has responded very well to the COVID-19 crisis. I was really impressed to see how quickly the people who work in the market transformed the space to allow for social distancing. And I think that that's created an amazing sense of trust in the market.
It was very important to us this year that neither of the students went into the market. So no students went to the site. We approached things differently for the safety of the students. Our approach was to have this 2-week workshop where week 1, the students simply analyzed the market in this new condition and documented what they saw, what they observed. And the second week, the students got to propose design speculation of how they feel that the market could be resilient as a result of this pandemic, but also juxtaposed with climate change.
I participated in a workshop on the Nakasero market last year where we were able to access the market and experience it firsthand, versus now where with the pandemic there are regulations put in place, so we haven't been able to access the market.
Working with the Uganda Moderate University students was, for me, really insightful and really helpful because they were able to provide fantastic feedback and knowledge on the market that I wouldn't have had.
I think that all of the documentation that we have from the photographer, like the images behind me, or the videos, or the time lapses, the aerials, that has all been really helpful and made this virtual workshop possible.
I think the response provided by the Nakasero market is very local and highly cultural specific, but also it provided us a way to look at the pandemic and social distancing using limited resources in a dense populated urban area.
Now market vendors are only allowed to sell their things using only one box and to sell things when they are well aligned to maintain what they call the social distancing.
The only real big challenge, I suppose, was the time zone thing, because when we joined the class sessions or even group discussions, it would be 5 p.m. in Kampala, but 9 a.m. in Washington.
In a special way, I thank the students of WashU and Uganda Matters University for taking part in this collaboration, for navigating a virtual jungle, for working in different time zones, and for doing it all in 2 weeks. It was amazing.
Teaching online has been an interesting experience. It's required a lot of communication and a lot of coordination, more so than in a typical studio environment where we all show up in the same place every day.
Teaching remotely has helped me be more clear and more intentional in the way that we're structuring the project in order to communicate more clearly to the students.
If I were to describe the entire process in one word, I would say intense.
Insightful.
Interesting working experience.
Revealing. Very successful.
Inspiration.
So this goes on to show the rest of the students' work. I think one, okay, how do I go back to, can I stop sharing as I conclude?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think one thing that we learned from that very last workshop is we needed someone to go in and get the information that was then shared with the students online. Franklin was actually very instrumental in that, going in to take the time lapses and take the photos and interview the vendors that were there. And also it was encouraging to see, initially we'd canceled that workshop and then we're able to have it finally, and the students were able to produce really good work. So I think that was really good that happened. So I'll end with that. That was the most recent workshop that we've done, and that overall gives a summary of where the practice is right now. So Thanks for listening. And maybe before we go into Q&A, Franklin could say something about himself before we start. So, Franklin?
Yes, hello. Something about myself. Yes, my name is Franklin. My name is Franklin Kasumba. I'm a graduate architect with Adengo Architecture. Yes, I've been with the firm for about, I think, almost a year and a half, I think, yes, under permanent contract as a graduate architect, helping out here and there, supporting the work of the firm, going to the fields, collecting photos, because on top of architecture, I also do a bit of photography, just as a hobby though. And yeah, really, can't really say much about myself.
I first met Franklin at that workshop for the African modernism. That was a workshop that had architects and photographers.
Oh, yes.
So it explains why his skills are both architecture and photography.
Amazing photographer.
for a hobby, is very amazing.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I can explain how happy I am to see this presentation for the people here in Brazil, because we have, of course, a lot of difference in territorial organizations and political organizations, and but we have a lot of in common. Not just because we have a lot of Black people here in Brazil because of the slavery period of the Portuguese colonization, but now we have a lot of African. We have a lot of Congolese here in São Paulo. We have a lot of Angolanos or Angolans, I think, and Nigerians, and I think the people who lives in Brazil and who lives in the center of the city, we can live with this kind of organization that you saw to us. But something that I'm really happy to see in your work, mainly in the workshops work, it's that you said sometime, you said the thing, it's when you was explaining about the Kampala before the colonization, you said a phrase that was super important to me, that the idea of the permanence didn't exist. So how can, because in all sense, in the Western sense, we work with architecture in the permanence sense of the building that have to be in the city like 100 years, 200 years in case of new countries. But how can we manage the idea of impermanence in architecture? So you work in your workshops, you tell us about mapping movements, which is impermanent, mapping negotiations, and see things every time in movement. And for me, it's super nice to see how can we manage this impermanence in architecture and urbanism.
So I hope you guys can hear me. I think
yes.
the side is
yes.
Okay,
yes.
yeah. And I think that's a good question. So the impermanence, it was possible in the pre-colonial times because that was a way of living for that group of people. And for most people, actually, the house that they lived in was renewed after every rainy season, for example. The materials were replaced and renewed. It wasn't meant to be permanent. And for some ethnic groups were more nomadic, so they could actually dismantle the house, pack it up, and move when it was time for moving, and then move back. So there was impermanence in that sense. I think when we move to now, because now we can't live the way we used to live many years ago, but the way that it's still there is what we saw in Elvis, his project, the project with Elvis, and how it was very natural for him to expand his shop and then fold it back, and how we struggled. And actually, Nina was part of that project, and part of that axon drawing that I showed, the struggle to show how do you draw something that is not permanently in one form. It unfolds and folds back every day. So it's still an ongoing thing that within the office we're dealing with. I found that the one easy way is to have a video. That's why every project now has a video, because that's become the easiest medium to use. In terms of drawings, collages, also I find...
And diagram.
Yeah, diagrams and collages, yeah. So it's something, I think, to me, what's most important is it's something we need to acknowledge. It's present in African cities, and maybe not only African cities. It might be very similar in your city, as you're saying. There might be a lot of similarities, but a way to acknowledge it and then document it is something that I'm very interested in, documenting something that's intangible.
Nice. And there is another thing, because the object, the market, is the place for impermanence, the street market, right? And I have a friend who said to me once, if you want to know a city, you have to go to the street market. So it's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question as well. Doreen or Nina or Franklin, I don't know. Do I don't know. You think we have to rethink the role of architecture today? I don't know. In the society, like start to participate more actively in the political scenario, like turning to municipal secretaries or deputies, like enter in the middle of the political scenario, you know, because our problems are, it's like a big problem, you know, it's not only a small project, but like to develop, I don't know if Kampala have a master plan. There's a master plan for the wetlands, for example. I don't know if us, like architects, enter in the politics, like inside the politics, and maybe we can change this big way, you know, this big problem, you know, like is the, I don't know, to make more sustainable cities, as you talk about for us in the conference. I don't know. It's like I think that here in São Paulo could be it's a very, very good way to transform the cities, you know.
Because you said the phrase that it's amazing, affordable house was not about the house, it's about the politics. So.
Yeah. So actually, I'd want to hear from Nina and Franklin what they think, because I'm always the voice that talks about advocating for architecture. So Franklin and Nina, what do you think the role of the architect is, given our...
Yeah, I would totally say, like, I would agree with you totally. I would say, like, architects have to engage, like, with their surroundings and act, like, in, like, yeah, social ways, and trying to shape, like, better futures for the cities. And like, for example, I think it's done again different where you are. So here in Germany, in Berlin, we are right now working as a social initiative together with the city, and we do like agreements and stuff, and you can kind of work with the city together and do like co-productive things. And there is still also like this lack of social housing and like a lot of gentrification going on here, but people are really political active because they can. I think then coming back to Kampala, being political active is maybe not so like easy, I would say, than here. And so it's harder there to also like do this kind of cooperations with the city. Like it's a totally different context of doing that. So then I would say it's done a different role maybe, but still important of advocating architecture and empowering like students or something to think about things differently. This is something I would say.
Franklin?
So for me, what I would think the role of an architect is, because one of the biggest issues we have is maybe that even the term architect is quite new in, let's say, even in East Africa. For example, I studied in a university that only started teaching architecture in the 70s. So we have like about 40 years of architecture only. So we are still defining that role, even to the point whereby, let's say, the planning authorities, you take your drawings to the city engineer to be approved by the city planner. And throughout your whole life in architecture school, there's a way you look down on the planners and the engineers. Okay, there's a way you can carry yourself as, I am the noble final say to everything. You have an idea of planning, you have an idea of engineering, but there's a high possibility your drawing has to be approved by an engineer or maybe sometimes an accountant. And then at some point, then we have to define it ourselves. We have to, because we have to put ourselves out there again. Because at the end of the day, here, especially with, let's say, small houses, they always go straight to a mason or to someone who has done a building before, and draw out the plan on the ground or something like that and build. And then if he finally figures out, oh, I have a friend who's an architect, and then you try to design something, and the first thing you tell him is, okay, what are your fees? And then when you tell him your fees, he asks you, does that include planning and and printing and all this other stuff? And you're like, no, the planning issue is somewhere else. And then so everyone is like, but what's your role then? If after all I only need an engineer on my side, so what's your role in this? So we are still defining it. But I feel with time, of course, maybe with our age mates and maybe the people who studied with, as long as if some slowly get to figure out what we do. And then in the society as a whole, maybe if we keep doing more of these, getting involved in the planning bits where we do, especially projects like, let's say, the market projects. If your research is then given to the planning department of the city, then there's a high possibility that maybe they will finally start listening to you as architects, and then finally also understand that maybe, unlike my assumption, yes, my assumption is planners are all about, you have a big picture and just chop it up. But if they can find that, they say an architect has all these different skills that come together, to create something that may be good for society or something like that. Yeah, that's like something.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
So our role is still growing. It's we'll define it soon. I don't know how soon we can define it, but our role is still growing. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And I guess what I would add to that, are you able to hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think what I'd add to both Nina and Franklin, I think Nina's point is really valid, that it's hard for us to just protest. the political environment here is very different. And then, it's hard for us to not necessarily protest, but to, try to advocate for something by involving, politicians and things like, dealing with politics and policies. It's very hard for us to do it. And I agree with Franklin that there's just a misunderstanding. There's a misunderstanding. What is an architect? What is an engineer? The engineer sounds more valuable than us, and we sound expensive. And then
the same here.
Yes. And so I don't know if between the three of us who've answered your question, it's something we're still in the process of grappling with, but we understand that it's important to do. It's not an easy task to do.
Yeah, but I think you found a very good way to do that, because all these videos and all these medias, these new medias, like the collage and the drawings, these perspectives, it's a good way to communicate. I guess the architecture have here in the global south maybe have a communication problem issue. It's like the way we communicate, maybe it's not affordable for everyone. I don't know if, but the video and all these medias maybe help to access more people than drawings, plans, and sections. We have to rethink this. So I don't know if it's only a thought here.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's true. The very first video was with the video guy had a background in journalism. The video about Elvis. And what I found interesting, I sat down with him the first meeting and I said, I came with a hard drive with so many files, like photos and drawings and everything. And then he asked me, what is Kitenge? And I was just like, what? He kind of explained that. Then he said, what is your story? And I was just like, what? All I can say is I have a hard drive full of files. So he was very patient. And I learned through him that there has to be a story. There has to be something you're getting across. And I think maybe the way we are trained in architecture, if you think of the presentations we did in architecture school, most times you've worked so hard, you've worked overnight, your presentation, you're half asleep, you're tired, you're afraid your professors, are going to blast your project. We aren't really, I think we're not really trained how to communicate to a larger public. We learn only how to communicate amongst ourselves. So I think working with that journalist/video person, I learned that there has to be a way to communicate across the architecture world.
It's a really difficult task to communicate space. Not easy. We have a question here. It's from Thais Santana. She's a big fan of Doreen, and she loved the affordable house one, and she believes it's a inspired project in all sense. So she wants to know your opinion about the Tattoo City in Kenya, the urban development of Tattoo City. I didn't know the project. I just Googled it. It's kind of.
I didn't. Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
And she wants to know your opinion about the Tattoo City in Kenya. You know this project?
No. Who is this in Kenya?
I know a Tattoo City. I just Googled it. It's a new neighborhood in Kenya, which is saying some kind of this kind of new urbanism, financial new urbanism. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it's something I don't know about.
No.
Well, and I have it's a little bit curiosity. When you was talking about the number of architects in Kampala, it's in Kampala or in Uganda, the number that you show us?
So unfortunately, it's not clear on my side. So if we remain repeating.
Yeah, sure. The few numbers of architects in that you showed us in the beginning of the presentation, it's in Kampala or in Uganda?
The number of architects?
Yeah.
Oh, the number of architects is in Uganda. Yes, in the whole country.
I think we have 200 architects in my neighborhood.
No, in our neighborhood, Vada, it's more than 200.
Yeah, it's because
it's like the architecture
there's a lot of architects here. So
yeah,
but no, it's because the number here in Brazil that as you search the number of school of architecture in Brazil, it's huge. It's I don't know. It's we have a lot because we have a lot of private schools, which is most of them it's super expensive, and like Escola da Cidade, our school, and we don't have a lot of public school. We have important ones, but we don't have a lot. So we have a lot of architects here, but most of them work with in a field of architecture that is for rich people. So we have a lot. We have some architects who work with mainly those work with urbanism and assistential technical assistance for organizations of like housing for affordable housings. But the number here it's huge. So
yeah, we can send some architects to work in Uganda. I
can go.
Yeah, we can go. We really wanna go.
Thais just said here it's she wants to know your opinion about the urban development in suburbians, who is actually struggling high pressure of the real estate sector. You have this case in Kampala?
So the question is the opinion on the. So for some reason I can hear Marco clearly, but Pedro, when you speak, it goes in and out. I don't know why. I can hear someone. Yeah.
Maybe I can talk like here. No, she wants to know your opinion about this kind of project, urban development in the suburban of the cities, which we have here in Brazil. Probably you have in Uganda too. This kind of new neighborhoods, the real estate sector.
Well, I think so. What's happening in Uganda, as I said, it started with 7 hills, but now there are many more, maybe 20 or even more hills. It keeps sprawling out. But people keep, the parliament is in Kampala. Then all the government buildings are in Kampala. And there's just so many things. The theater is in Kampala, the university is in Kampala. So many things are in one place that really what would make sense is to somehow decentralize everything. We need another city. I mean, I'm sure, Brazil went through this with Brasilia. And maybe sometimes you can make another city. It may not be as successful, but there must have been a reason why there was a need to make another city. I feel like that's where we are now, too many things in one place. But also another thing I should say, I just thought of something Franklin said. He said that his school, he went to school in Tanzania, started in the 70s, but the architecture school in Uganda started in 85. It's very new. That's another reason why we're very few. And then, as you saw in the presentation, we didn't have like an Oscar Nehemiah. We didn't have a Ugandan trained architect who then kind of reimagines how to live now. So
you have now called Doreen Adengo.
Yeah.
So there are many things that we still are grappling with. But I think she has a good question. The kind of urban sprawl, it's happening, but it's not organized. People are building for themselves, even people that are wealthy enough to be able to, I don't want to use the word wealthy, but people that can afford an architect still want to bypass the architect. And so these neighborhoods that are coming up, they're very ad hoc, the way that they're coming up. I don't know if that's what's happening in Brazil. I imagine there's better planning in place.
Yeah, we have all kind of this problem here too. It's because I think something that it's the same in all countries of the global south about architects is that architecture is not a real thing for the government or for the politicians or for the people. So we have to fight to understand our place in the society. And here in Brazil, it's the same because we have a lot of out constructions. We have a lot of engineering construction is not called architect. So it's really the same. And we have a lot of problems with policies for affordable housings or a lot of difference of kind of people, class of people. So we are now passing for elections for the municipality. So we have in São Paulo, which is the largest city in Brazil, now a lot of discussion about architecture and urban planner, but it's just because of the elections. So after the elections, maybe I don't know.
You forget, no? I have another question for the team, Doreen, Nina, and Franklin. Doreen, you've shown us an image with buildings from the end of the 9th century, made with traditional materials, and also the projects of the affordable houses as well, which included a deeper research of material. You think you make this research. Considering today these contemporary issues like the climate change and others new issues, not so new as well, no, but do you think we need to rethink the way we build? No, we need to rethink the way we build them. Is there an idea in Uganda to rescue the use of local materials as an alternative for this construction? I don't know if there's exists this research included into the university in Kampala or in Uganda in general.
I see. Email Franklin. Do you know anything about this? I know probably they're doing research. Okay, I can comment on it, okay. Then they can comment as well. But so there are 4 schools of architecture. One is Makerere University, it's the most traditional one. It has a 5-year degree. Then there's another one called Uganda Matters University. It's located in Nkozi, so it's also called Nkozi sometimes. And I've been teaching there. So Nkozi, their school is the Faculty of Built Environment, and they're very big on environmental, sustainability and climate change and all these issues. So they've done a lot of experiments, and they get a lot of grants to study materials. So the most of the research is out of Nkozi and from the Faculty of Built Environment. And when you go there, you'll see just sample walls that they've put up and sample structures that they've looked at different materials. But within the practice, because most of the projects I showed you were through the practice, especially the time when we were looking at materials and we're working with a developer, he in the end has to sell the housing, especially that one house, the first house. What we found is what happened in pre-colonial times, those materials like straw and reeds, the average person now doesn't want the straws and reeds. They want something that they aspire to be seen a certain way, and they want a house of, sometimes they don't even want the mud brick. There's an idea that this clay brick is for the NGO schools. They don't want it for their house. So there has to be convincing for someone to use the sustainable, clay block. And definitely no plastic. There's some people that do experimental housing and they melt plastic and plastic something. Nobody wants a plastic house. Yeah, so what we try to propose, given these practical constraints, is just to advocate for brick. And these renders are just to show that you can use brick, it can look beautiful. Brick is not only for schools, it could be for your house or for your apartments, and it could still be sustainable. So it could still be sustainable and also good. So normally within the practice, that's always a challenge. We know the client has to sell what we're designing, so we need to be aware of what the market wants. In terms of research, it's the people teaching at Uganda Matters University. The very last workshop we saw, the students, that's the school that they're in. They're the ones doing a lot of the research. So I don't know, Nina and Franklin, what you think. I think your question is about how do we return to more sustainable materials, and is it possible?
Yeah, it's like use local materials, because here in Brazil, we in São Paulo, southwest of the Brazil, we are coming back to use the wood as a predominant material. Like forget a little bit our concrete tradition, and start to rethink the use of these materials. Our modern architecture is mainly about the concrete, and now we're trying to use new material. It's very difficult because there's a movement, it's like a slow movement, but trying to use local materials. Wood, we have a lot of wood, a legal wood, not illegal wood, but I don't know. Thinking, I guess the world is trying to change the way architecture is materialized. It's a curiosity about Uganda and Kampala.
So I think I agree with Doreen that what I found in Kampala, that many people or many clients think this kind of blue glass, we call it blue glass architecture, because it's like you have, probably you also have it in Brazil, this like colored glass, which is reflecting a bit. Yeah. So like many people like considering this as like modern, and since it's modern, it is also good. But in fact, the inside of the buildings, it's super hot. You need air conditioning. You need like for that more power, everything. So in fact, this is not like working according to the climate. No, it's just colored glass, but people still think kind of this is modern. So and many of the, like for example, also the modernist buildings Doreen showed, they had like kind of they were like windows being built with that like shading system or something that you don't need, or cross ventilation or something that you don't need, for example, air conditioning. Yeah, but these are like old buildings of like so many clients want these modern buildings, I would say. So yeah, and I think I don't know, there has to be more good examples of new buildings considering this material and also the climate there, that people know, okay, oh, you can also do it like that, and it's in fact better. This is something I would say.
Okay.
Frankie.
Oh yeah, it's my turn. Okay. So the thing here, the buildings, yes, we need to rethink how we build in Uganda, yes, and even in Kampala. But we are always, as Doreen says, sometimes you find a client who is insisting on, let's say he, because now people have started, okay, before COVID, they were traveling around the world and all that. So when they come back with these ideas of these glass towers from Dubai, from China, and many would want their, especially if they're building something like 5 stories, 10 stories, they want their building to have a curtain wall cladding, and yet somehow curtain walls are not really for the tropics. So they would actually frown upon any building that has these the elements that are mainly from the buildings that were built in the 70s. You know, the big verandas, the tiny windows. I mean the windows, which not necessarily having a glass facade, but having windows so that the building doesn't heat up. You know, so there's always that issue of the client wants to see his building looking blue. And you as the architect, you come with your brown designs, your brown colors and things like that. But
it's very
the funny thing is, the buildings that are designed and let's say that meet the climate, okay, they are sustainable with the climate, with the materials, using thatch, using wood, are usually found in, let's say, these tourist hotels in these tourist resorts. If you go to the national park, if you go camping, if you go, yes, up country and go for a safari, then there's a high possibility you're going to sleep in a hotel or in a resort with a nice bungalow with which grass thatch. There's it's cool inside. It's not using air conditioning, and it's in touch with nature. And you'll have that for, let's say, 2 weeks or for the duration of your holiday. Then you get back to the city, to the pollution, to the dust, to the everything, and your air conditioning and all that. Yeah. So yeah, now trying to create a bridge where you can try to bring this together. Yeah, it's a challenge, but at least what I know is that most people, I think around the world, most people like copying each other. There's a lot of copycat business around. So if, let's say, if you build something and someone sees it and they're like, oh, that looks interesting, and if they can actually come and visit and see how it actually performs, then maybe that can be spread out to the next person, like that, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
Yeah.
I just, it's more a curiosity than a question. But about the workshops, how it happened? It's an invitation, or you do some proposal for the university, and how it's possible to not to make money with that, but to turn possible to do the workshop?
So with the workshop, the first one was already in the program. When Umpo approached me, there was already a workshop that she had in her program. So that was the first workshop, Kampala Exchange. And that's how I learned how it worked, and I realized the value of it. Then when I was approached by Manuel Hertz, I think they had I'm not sure what they'd imagined, but I proposed the workshop to them. I said, instead of coming and photographing buildings and going, why don't we include students, make this workshop, make it interactive? It's good for both sides because, say with those buildings, it's very hard to get access to buildings here. For some reason, it's very hard to photograph buildings. Everyone, from the security guard, everyone tries to stop you from photographing the buildings. But if you go with a group of students and you say it's a workshop, then it's easier. So I kind of explained to them it's better for us to work with the students, and it's also good for the students. At that time, there was only one person photographing buildings, at least that I knew of, in Kampala. The other people that signed up for the workshop, they photographed events, like weddings and things like that. The idea of photographing a building had just never crossed their minds. And so,
why a building? There is no people.
Yes. And since then,
it's my parents said about my Instagram account. Why there is no building? There is just building.
But and since then, some of them have even won awards and kind of gone on into this life of photographing buildings more seriously, which is really encouraging. And so that's when I proposed. And so, yeah, for every initiative I got involved with, I propose it. And then I explain the benefits of having this exchange and say it's good for both sides. It's good for the students. You'd empower a group of young people. And so, yeah, so that's how it is. Each group that approached me, I'll propose it. And then I'd show an example. The videos helped. I could always show the last video. And then we get it, and then we say, okay, let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, and Doreen, and this how you manage with the city government or the municipality to make the project, to execute the project of the market, because you changed everything, it's the authorization. How did you get the authorization for do that? Or I don't know if it's clear.
You mean like, say, one of the projects that we've shown, how do we go through approvals? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. The approval.
So there's it's a long process, but if you finish the technical drawings, and then the approvals office, it's very bureaucratic, but there's a system, and you just basically have to go through the system. They check the drawings, and then their fees, the official fees, then eventually it gets approved. So you have to go through this system in approval.
Yeah, but for the market workshop as well, it's the same process or not?
Oh, you're talking about I thought you meant building approvals.
No. For the market, for the market workshop.
Okay, so what we did, and Franklin can also talk about this because he was involved in the most recent one. So I go to that market a lot. I happen to like it. And there's one guy who you saw in the video, he's one of the carry boys. Like when you go to buy something, he walks with you and kind of helps you carry it back to your car. He's since actually evolved and now delivers because not too many people go into the market. But I made friends with him and then asked him who's in charge. And then he introduced me to who that person was. And then we explained, again, we're coming with students. We're just, observing. We'll share everything with you that we find, that kind of thing. And then we got the point.
Oh, perfect. It's like a social movement. No? Perfect.
But so Franklin, I don't know if you have anything about your experience, because then he was then the one in the field dealing with those same people who gave us permission. Sometimes they'd give us a hard time. So
Franklin is the way to get the things,
Yeah.
No, I mean it's always fun. Okay, it can be fun, it can be hard because let's say you talk to one person, they give you permission, you set up your equipment, you start taking photos, and then another person comes and is like, what are you guys doing here? We're taking photos. And the guy's like, you get out of the market, you haven't talked to the right person. And that's when you find out that, let's say, maybe you talked to the vice chairman and not the chairman. Or maybe you talked to a person in charge of the parking area, but you didn't talk to the person in charge of the buildings. So, you have all these small politics inside. Maybe also the other challenge was let's say, for example, for us to catch the time lapse of, let's say, how early the market rises up. That means we had to get to the market because, the time issue. We had curfew at that time, which was from 6:30 in the morning, 6:30 a.m. up to 7 p.m. in the evening. So now you have to wake up at 6:30 and make sure you rush to town. Okay, literally walk to town. Okay, sometimes if you're lucky, you find some kind of transport because there was no public transport. Transport was mainly for government, ambulances, medics, things like that. Mm-hmm. So it's just a way of finding a way of getting to the market early enough so that you do not miss that change. Because at the beginning, there's so many people, everyone is buying and everyone is setting up. And then at 8 a.m., I think it was 8 a.m. or 8:30, the commotion stops and everyone now goes into this social distanced packaging around the whole market. So when you're trying to rush into the market to make sure you get that first madness before, madness is the first chaos before the order. And then what else? I mean, the market is interesting. You just sit and take your photos, and it makes you appreciate. I mean, I think the whole idea of, let's say, making time lapses makes you appreciate how the city evolves, how the market grows, the dynamics, how different people interact with the market. For example, the traders in the market used to sleep in the market because of all these COVID restrictions. They were not allowed to leave the market. The idea was, if you stayed in the market, then if you work in the market, sleep in the market. It's only guys from outside who come in, buy, and then leave. So so this whole idea of just seeing how they set up and how in the afternoon everyone leaves, how even the umbrellas are now being used as almost like a way of social distancing. Your umbrella shouldn't touch the other person's umbrella, and that's when you figure out, I'm actually within the 6. I'm actually within the 6 feet for social distancing and things like that. But it was a fun project, yeah. Apart from the moments when you have to, you worry about your equipment, you worry about permission. But when people see you going there all the time, they somehow get used to seeing you around, and you can easily blend in, and with time you become almost invisible. And once you get that level of trust, then that means you can take more candid photos, or your time lapse can become richer, something like that.
Yeah. Actually, if I can add something to what Franklin has said at the end there, I feel like the biggest thing that we've learned internally, us, Nina, Franklin, and the others, and then with the people collaborated with, is the biggest component is trust. There has to be trust. Like, without trust, it's really hard for a collaborative project to have good outputs, basically.
Yeah, sure.
And to get trust, know all this behind the organization. It's super important.
Yeah.
How the things works. This kind of thing that the traders have to sleep in the market. It's awful. Well, I think we're done.
It's like 2 hours.
And thank you very much. Congratulations for your amazing work. And I had to I want to soon to see news about you soon. Hope. And thank you very much for your patience with our English, and and thank you,
Yeah.
Doreen, Nina, and Franklin.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to say something to close our conversation here, or only if
Yeah,
say
sure.
goodbye.
Do you guys want to say something? Then I can say last. Nina, something you want to say?
Me?
Nina,
I would say stay healthy and stay active.
Yeah, we try to say.
Yeah, it's difficult here in Brazil with this president, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a mini Trump down there.
Yeah, it's a Trump model.
Yeah.
No.
So
I think
Franklin,
what I would say is maybe it's since we are all in the tropical belt, I believe that maybe this whole collaboration or maybe this whole studying of each other is a nice idea. I mean, so that we have a bit more south to south kind of collaboration instead of, because mostly, I think even if you see from our workshop, it's more of a north to south. So yeah, if we can have a south to south, it's always because since we are already in the tropics, so we'll be almost speaking the same language. Okay, yeah, maybe it's not really the same language, but at least we all understand the conditions we live in because we are literally the same. Yeah, so it's always a nice idea. It's always encouraging to see this kind of conversations. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Franklin.
Thank you.
And I would like to say thank you for the invitation. We noticed on our Instagram we've become very popular in Brazil. So many people adding. And I think I had a friend I used to work with when I was living in New York called Maya Akeho. I promised that I would say hello to her over this presentation. And also, I've always wanted to visit Brazil. So I feel like this is the first step.
Yeah,
you are welcome.
Yeah,
I have a lot of things here.
Yeah, and I agree with what Franklin's saying. I think a south to south way of collaborating would be really, really good. North to south is also good, Nina.
Sometimes.
I think
I would totally support south to south.
But yeah, I think that each of us, we're isolated in our, environment, but we're actually dealing with the same things because we have the same climate. So if maybe this could be the beginning of more discussions that we could have and, find ways to collaborate and even just ways to work remotely, but together. So
sure. We think too, it's an open doors here that it starts off something that we have to develop after these pandemic conditions.
Yeah, we have to organize a workshop together, Doreen.
Okay, yeah.
Here and in Uganda.
Yeah, Pedro and I, we have a big dream that is make this, after the pandemic situation, make this course like with travels, with knowing the places, not only with the video conference or things.
But okay. I will end the broadcasting, but we still we stay here for a little bit more. Muito obrigado, pessoal, pela paciência que vocês tiveram de novo nessa incrível conversa. Semana que vem tem mais. Não vai ter um sábado que a gente vai pular, a gente vai emendar 3 sábados seguidos. Semana que vem é com o escritório mexicano comunal Taller comunal, desculpa. Vai ser incrível também. São 2 arquitetas mexicanas que fazem um trabalho com diversas comunidades lá no México, de empoderamento e tudo mais, que é demais. Então, até semana que vem.
É isso aí, brigadão. Até semana que vem. Abraço. Bom final de semana.
Tchau, tchau.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
No, Doreen, you stay.
Oh.
Bye.
Oh, okay.
Ciao.
Oh, okay.